Hi everybody, I'm Gabriella Mirabelli. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Anatomy Media. We're a strategic consultancy and creative services agency working primarily with entertainment brands to help them market and promote their content. Make the trailers and the spots that make you binge content. But that's not really what I'm here to talk to you today about. Today I'm going to talk about what's happening and how to leverage other people's robust data science teams to your own advantage. But before I actually even get into that, I want to go through a little history. Now, some people in the room will know this history, and some people in the room definitely won't because they're way too young to know the history. But way back, the 40s to the early 80s, broadcast era, there were 3 channels, and the TV went off at midnight. They played the national anthem, and then it was off. That was it. And what's interesting is that prime time then, you had 50 to 60 million viewers. And just to put that in context, today a hit has 2 million viewers. So those Mad Men were shooting fish in a barrel. It was a captive audience. It was mass media, absolutely. Then came cable, the cable revolution, the nichification of everything. Everybody was going to get their specialized channel. You know, Lifetime knew women, ESPN knew sports, Nickelodeon knew kids, MTV was cool. It was all, you know, all niche, and it sort of felt like maybe it was personalized, except it wasn't. It was still mass media. Programming was still the candy coating to serve up an ad that you really couldn't escape. But then we have some tech happen. And we shift from mass media to my media. We have portable, personal, social, participant. And what all this means is that I'm not a captive audience anymore. It becomes an attention economy. Advertisements have to be interesting or else I'm not going to watch them. It's all about demand. There isn't really a demand for ads. Except that's not really true, because if you think about the Super Bowl, people love the ads in the Super Bowl. They'll repost the ads in the Super Bowl because they're good. So it really is just that the bar has raised. And so it's in this environment where it changed from being mass media to my media, where people really needed to think about what that meant. It changed the viewer's expectation. And I'm going to tell a story. About 2 years ago, it's when the reboot of Star Wars came out. My son, in his room, on his laptop, I go, "Hey buddy, what you watching?" He goes, "Star Wars." And I was like, "What? What are you watching?" He goes, "Star Wars." And I said, "Do you know what mommy does for a living?" And he's like, "Mom, don't worry, I'm streaming it." I'm like, "It's still piracy and you're stealing." He's like, "No, it's not." And I was like, "Oh, it is. Disney agrees with me, it totally is. It's piracy." And as much as I like to think that my boy is a special snowflake, the only one like him, it really got me thinking. I know it's not a scientific, sample of one, but how many people were pirating content, and especially how many young people? And really, when you're thinking about being successful, there's a great Wayne Gretzky quote, which is, "You don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where it's going to be." And that's really appropriate for media, because you can't plan for today's audiences. You need to plan for tomorrow's audiences. You need to meet them where they're going to be, because they're the people who are creating the context and the habits that we all have to deal with. So it was really important what was going on with this piracy. And I did a survey of 18 to 24-year-olds, that's young millennials. 69% of them pirate content. These are the different types of piracy. 3 out of 5 are sharing passwords or cable logons. It's rampant, and that means it's taking place outside of the commercial ecosystem. So that's a bit of concern. But really, it also is a concern as to why? Why pirate? And it has to do with user experience, really. My son had gone to the movies. He had spent the money. He had seen Star Wars there, but he wanted to see it where he wanted to see it, which was at home. He wanted to see it on the device he wanted to see it, his laptop, and he wanted to see it when he wanted to see it, which was right then. And he looked, and he found somebody who would deliver that to him. Now, a lot of people talk about price being really the driver. Altman-Valandry did an amazing survey. I think the data was discussed last year here about skinny bundles. And one of the things that was interesting that came out of that survey was that when they offered these cheaper skinny bundles, the people who went for them weren't really the young millennials. It was the existing cable consumers, so they were cannibalistic. So price may be part of user experience, but it's not the be-all and end-all of user experience. So why, obviously he knew about Star Wars because you couldn't not know about Star Wars, but how do they find content? And discovery really is really important because there's so much content these days. So also decided to survey it. We surveyed 3,000 young millennials and found that 58% of them are discovering their content on social. And we found that SEO was going down, social was going up. And we anticipate that this is only going to increase. Now, this is a real challenge because, especially for my clients, the entertainment clients, these are the discovery pipes and they don't own them. If you think back to broadcast, you think back to cable, they owned those pipes. They told you about the content, you were there, they could control when you would see the promos for the content. Now, that's just not true of social media. And what's more is it's also very leveled. You have Mary Jane's cat video, and then you have Viacom's video. You have the New York Times, and then you have the guy in the tinfoil hat. And they're all in the same feed, and they're all in the same typeface, and this causes problems. There's been a lot, obviously, in the news about people being able to distinguish between fake news and real news, and quality content versus other content. And then does it even matter if I want to see Mary Jane's cat videos and that's all I want to watch? Well, then bully for me. But it means that it's tricky for people who publish content. I was at a media council breakfast at the Paley Center, and Mike Hopkins, at the time he was the CEO of Hulu, and I said, what's your social strategy, given this? And he said, well, we're frenemies, they really need our content. And I said, really? 50% of ad revenue is Google. About the other 50% is Facebook. VCs aren't investing in ad plays anymore. How important to Facebook is Hulu? And he waited. And I said, not very. Now think about that, right? Think about these giant companies, NBC, Viacom, Fox. They are not that important to Facebook. Facebook is enormous. Just simply enormous. And so what does this mean? What do we have to do? It means that you have to be smarter. And some of the companies that do really well, they get that, and they devote the resources to researching and then cycling back and communicating. It's constantly feeding back and adjusting what people are doing, how they're doing it. And some companies, Netflix, has tons of resources. I'm Little Anatomy. I don't have those resources, and other small businesses don't. But what I can do is I can leverage what they've already done. A lot of times they'll publish some of these results, or you can look at it and you can kind of reverse engineer and try to figure it out. So let's finally get to Netflix. Now, Netflix is really very well known for their product, and this is what they have a whole team, the product team. And this recommendation panel that you get to is actually tailored to you. Your recommendation panel is going to be different from yours or different from your children's. So why? Well, the thing is, when you're scrolling, you have about 90 seconds to capture somebody's attention. 90 seconds, not very long. The good news is, in 13 milliseconds, you can understand a visual. So that's good if you have a good visual. But the other thing that's important to Netflix is to have people stay in Netflix, to stay there. So you can't just get a good visual and then kind of give them not a show that relates to the visual. It's got to relate to it. It's not like a movie trailer. Sometimes we make a great trailer and maybe the movie is not so great, but you've already paid your fee and too bad for you. So what did they do? Well, what they did is A/B test. And I assume you guys can all read, so I'm not going to read it to you. The thing I will say is that very, very small changes can have very big impacts, and that is something that we're going to talk about a lot today. So what's an A/B test? Essentially, they pick one thing, and that's really important. You can only be testing one thing at a time to really get the results. Seems really obvious. People want to cut corners. It's not useful if you cut corners because you don't get clean results. So they have 4 takeaways that they have shared with people. And so let's go over the 4 things they share. Now, the first is that emotions are an efficient way to display. They tested these 6 thumbnails and this lower one. And what's interesting, again, it goes to sort of human biology. People from birth learn how to read faces. They learn how to understand the complex emotions. And a show, this particular show, has a lot of different things going on. And so having slightly different emotions communicates a lot. It reads really quickly. People understand what they're going to get. The other thing they found was that nice guys finished last. Again, human biology. We're hardwired to remember bad things, bad days. And I think this goes back to evolutionary biology. You remembered that bush had a berry that made me really sick. I'm not going to eat it again. Or that lion lives over there, so maybe I won't walk by that path again. So bad days, bad guys, you notice them, you remember them. Next was less is more, simplicity. Now, coming from creative services, this is not surprising to me because a lot of the time when we're creating an image spot, we may have 3 episodes from every show that airs on a certain network. And I'm boiling it down to a 30-second spot. So every single piece, every single shot has to work really hard. Well, imagine you have one image that has to talk about an entire show. So that one image has to work really hard. And simplicity, by having it only one, you can see her face much more clearly. You can read it. Otherwise, it's just too many. It's too messy. It's too muddy. So simplicity goes there. And then high contrast colors. If you think about signage, it's pretty, again, not surprising, but think about it when you're doing things, because thumbnails, making those thumbnails good, you have 90 seconds to get somebody's attention, make it work for you. Now, with video, we are seeing, obviously here we are, streaming media, it's all about video. There was a report I read recently that video gets 138% more engagement on platforms. So video is really, really important. And a lot of people, I've been at conferences where people will say, we make viral videos. This is what we do. We're so good. We've cracked the code. We know how to do it. And they're not alone. I was at another Paley breakfast, and Sherry Redstone was there. I asked her the same Mike Hopkins question, what's your social strategy? And she said, we make viral videos. And I thought, oh, great. Good luck with that. When I go to investors, I don't say, my strategy is to make money, because it's stupid. It doesn't work that way. And it especially doesn't work that way when you don't control the thing that makes the thing viral. These algorithms which surface content are controlled by somebody else. The pipes are out of your control, the algorithm is out of your control. And I'm not being snarky. I am, but I have data. Group 9, and you may recognize some of the companies that fall into Group 9, and you may say, well, those are all viral video companies. And I'd say you were right last year, because they found last year that 37% of their videos, their views, were viral. But then within a year, it was 19. Well, that's a little frightening to have that kind of a dip in your business. That's a big dip. So what are you going to do? And essentially, they started thinking about it, and they were like, well, what we really need to do is create a floor. We need to have more solid work that maybe we're not hitting those outliers. Maybe we'll hit it out of the park once or twice, but we have a good floor, and we know that we're not going to be cratering. And so up comes our favorite thing, A/B testing. And here, again, it's the attention economy, and in the article that they were talking about hacking the algorithm, you're not hacking the algorithm, you're hacking people and human behavior, because human behavior is far less subject to change than the algorithm. And they did find, however, some really interesting things. Again, small changes, big impact. The first one was split screens. Now, on the one hand, you say, you said simplicity, and that's really messy. But again, I also said you have to be able to quickly understand what you're seeing. On the left, Donald Trump at a microphone, could be anything. On the right, oh, I know what this video is going to be about. Would you believe that the only difference, though, is the very thumbnail start? I'm going to play them to prove I'm not lying. So the first one.
Your San Francisco quarterback, I'm sure nobody ever heard of, but there was an article today, it was reported, that NFL owners don't want to pick him up because they don't want to get a nasty tweet from Donald Trump. Do you believe that?
So then the next one. Now, look at how long it's different. Not very.
Your San Francisco quarterback, I'm sure nobody ever heard of, but there was an article today, it was reported, that NFL owners
with that very small
don't want to pick him up
increase of 36%
because they don't want to get a nasty tweet from Donald Trump. Do you believe
splitting
that?
a screen, and that wasn't expensive graphics. That wasn't, that was just it was making the thumbnail a little more engaging, a little more interesting. The other thing that you often see that you're faced with is a talking head. And you're like, oh boy, that's gonna be really dull. What am I gonna do with that? And what they found there is quick cuts in the first 12 seconds. If you can engage somebody by quickly cutting, you're gonna have greater success. So look, he's known to be really dry. So count the number of cuts in the first 12.
When your audience has kids of their own, some already do, you can look them in the eye and say with conviction in your heart, we're going to make this world even better for you than the one we inherited. That means a lot.
7. I counted 7 times there was a jump cut. Now, if you work in linear, that is so ugly. You're like, that is hideous. If somebody gave me that rough cut, I would fire them. It's really bad. But, thinking of that young audience and also the context in which this is. They're used to seeing vloggers who cut, jump cut. So they're used to seeing it that way, and also the context, it's fine. They wouldn't probably like it in a linear environment, but in a digital environment, it's okay. And by keeping them for that first 12 seconds, enough of the content has seeped in that they'll actually stay, and then you don't have to keep cutting it like that. So again, small change. A really interesting, another often viral group, Upworthy, they have a really great metaphor. I love it. And they talk about it as the grocery store metaphor for how they deal with their packaging of their content. They don't necessarily change their content, but they say when you go to a grocery store, you pick the package. And then maybe you'll look at the nutritional value. Nobody in this room walks around saying, I'm gonna look at the nutritional value and then, then I'll figure out what brand it is. They just don't. So they had a video, and the title was initially, Planet of the Apes is closer to reality than you think. And then they had the exact same video, and they named it this, 2 monkeys were paid unequally, see what happens next, okay? So the first one, 10,000 views. Want to guess the second? Somebody, make a guess. 2 million. That was the only change. Seriously, right? And the thing is context, right? Because social media is fun. It's not school. And also, if you think about, what people go for, what you're competing with. So this just seems more like, ooh, prurient a little bit, right? And so what happens next with these monkeys? So that proves that, again, it's very small changes, big differences. Now, another question that often comes up is, what time should we post on social? And it's important to know that more isn't necessarily better, and every social platform is different. But there was a great study that BuzzFeed did. Now, I really want to call attention to something here. It's like a major pet peeve of mine. You see the dots? Those dots are averages. The green line is the median, and the gray is the bulk. This is why when somebody comes to you and says, here's the average of anything data related, you tell them to leave your office, because averages are not really helpful. Bill Gates walks into this room and all of our average income goes up astronomically, but none of us is any richer. So you really want to be looking at medians because they're much more reflective of what's going on. And if you're really talking about publishing cadence, you actually want to really put it down as it's happening so you have a sense of the patterns and you can make adjustments. It's a pain, but if you're going to have something useful, that's what you've got to do. But what did they find? Friday, 3 p.m. That was the magic hour. And before you're like, whoa, now I'm going to publish everything Friday at 9. The thing is that they found that it actually didn't work for them. Because when they didn't have a prescriptive time, this is how it went. But when they did, holy smokes, it's as if Google Maps sent every driver in the same route, and there was a traffic jam. By prescribing a time, they changed the context. And part of it actually spoke to an organizational issue. They had all the editors publishing their own stuff. So all of the editors wanted to maximize their own performance. They all wanted the best time, but when they all went for the best time, everybody's performance suffered. So what do they have to do? Was they had a new best practice. They created a centralized, consistent publishing calendar. And the way in which the editors interacted was they had begun to know and get a feel for which posts would do well and which were the stronger posts. And they would communicate that. They'd say, this one's going to be a good one. And those good ones that people had self-flagged that would be good, they were put in the more likely to be successful times, so they would get an extra bump. But it was still done centrally. And I think that this way the editors could focus on the content. And the data scientists were really cognizant of sharing information that could be useful and actionable to the right party at this point, because we all get a lot of data. It doesn't necessarily help you. It can paralyze you. You don't know what it means. Oh, and another thing with publishing is to remember it's a global clock. One of the things BuzzFeed found was that all the publishing was happening on an East Coast clock, even though they have a big office in LA. And I'm from New York, and I'm like, well, of course, the East Coast is what it's all about. But really, you have to think of when your audience is on, and you have to recognize that there are people on the West Coast who have a different cadence. Their life is going to be slightly different because the time is different. Also, they noticed that it was very light publishing on the weekends. When is your audience on social media? Weekends. So you might want to plan on putting some stuff on the weekend. Or maybe they're not. You should know when your audience is there and meet them there. Remember, it's about their experience and meeting them where they are. One of the things that happens, you hear a lot, I've heard a lot of consultants say, you don't want to repost the same thing, and you've got to keep creating new, and it's this endless maw, and you think, oh my, the return on investment, the lifespan is 3 days, and then I'm done, and I've invested, and I've got to do it again. This is killing me. But you can actually make content work harder than that. And the way you do that, Condé Nast and The New Yorker came up with a way, and that was evergreen content. It's not a new idea. I mean, the way you think of it relative to linear is it's reruns. It's stuff that isn't bound particularly by any time. It can be leveraged again. Think of these as your Law and Order SVU episodes. They do well. You don't have to watch them in any particular order. People like them, and if you can use them again, you can make them work harder. You can make them earn more money. So you have an initial publishing, and then you keep putting it out periodically, gaining more views, doing better, and also your ROI is improved. And a lot of publishers are already doing this, and these are publishers who do pretty well. They create a library, they dip into it, it's organized. and they communicate. One thing to remember, though, is that every social platform is different, so you really have to think of it differently. When you're A/B testing, you're going to be testing different metrics, and you need to interact with them differently. Let's take cadence. We were just talking about cadence. The cadence that you need for YouTube is very different than the cadence you need for Twitter because of the way the platform acts, the way people interact with it. It's just very different. So you need to be aware of what you're doing. Anatomy puts out, well, self-plug here, we put out a weekly newsletter called The Anatomy of Social, and we look at the top 15 entertainment cable brands from last year, and we measure them across 3 social platforms, their videos, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And what we look at is who's winning each week and who's doing well. And why we think this is important is because we think brands are important for brands. But at the moment, brands are not particularly important to viewers. So how do you make brands important to viewers? Because right now, viewers think of shows, but a brand, let's see, Discovery is more than just the original program. They also have some reruns that they're going to show. They have other things. It's broader than that. And they need to be somebody who a consumer will go to even though that new show is no longer available, that they view the brand as a curator, a trusted source. I mean, one of the reasons, like Netflix, for instance, Netflix can put up a new show, you know nothing about it, but you'll give it a go. HBO, same thing. You'll give it a try just because it's an HBO show. And that helps also with discovery. You want something to watch, you may go to their channel, you may go to their place. I had an interesting, TNT hadn't been doing too well. And I got a phone call from their strategy guy who said, you know, you're really not measuring this properly. You really need to look at all the show pages as well and roll them up. And that would be the way you should do it. And I said, well, I hear what you're saying. But when I go to TNT's, one of TNT's good shows, successful shows, Animal Kingdom, there is no TNT branding on that page. None. So that's great for Animal Kingdom, but what happens when Animal Kingdom ends? You've not helped TNT at all. You've not built that brand. What was interesting was the next week, TNT did a lot better because they were putting their show things, they were putting it there. They realized, oh yeah, maybe we do want to talk about our brand. Well, when we're looking at social, the things that we have found mattered were weekday posted, brand, platform, audience size, duration of video, type of video. We discovered, and certainly when looking at ROI of videos, that the type of video was the single most important thing. What types? We bucketed them into these types. Generic, well, I'm not going to read it. You can read it. Reaction video, for those of you who don't know what that is this. That's it. It's a reaction. Don't get much more authentic than that. Everybody loves authenticity, and they do really well. People feel authentic, connected. I'm not the target audience. It doesn't work for me, but it works. Works for them. So the next type, vlogs and behind the scenes, and what this really goes to, again, when we think about my media, is people wanting to know a bit more about the shows they like. When you're targeting people, you also need to remember on social, you're not really targeting your audience, you're targeting your audience's friends because you want them to share it. And so this is, I know something you don't know and I'm going to share it with you. And so this is a behind the scenes. Start just program footage. Nicely cut.
This is William Shakespeare.
And then you go in and have directors talking about William Shakespeare. And the last one is generic, and this is counterintuitive because I've said you can't just repurpose things, you need to think about things. And generic, what I'm talking about is really promos that are put and drive linear viewership. Where generic works consistently is if you have a hit that people already love. American Horror Story had an amazing campaign. They won social for the entire time, the lead up to their new season, because people just were like, what? What's the show gonna be about? This is not obviously American Horror Story, but it's another kind of fun, just generic.
Fasten your seatbelt.
That's what I'm talking about.
Watch 13 Nights of Halloween, October 19th through the 30th.
So it drives to linear. For the most part, I'm not a huge fan of driving to linear from social. I believe that people want frictionless. You should slide them into an app. You should slide them into a website. Right now, a lot of networks drive like 60% to linear, which I don't think makes a lot of sense. I think they should do it the other way. But people are, right now, the money is in linear, and so that's where people are incented to go. But not everybody can only program the type of video that does really, really well. I would say HGTV, for instance, has an advantage because they do all those hands and pans videos that everybody loves, and that's what they can do over and over again. Fantastic. What if you can't? What if you have something that's, you gotta put it out there, it's a branded integration, it's kind of icky. Well, what you can do is it's actually, the flow begins to matter. So remember about the 3-day life cycle of a post. If you post something, a type that's pretty successful, and then you have something that's maybe not going to be as successful, but the next day you have another one that's going to be successful, what happens is the viewer isn't really turned off by having had a less fun experience, but also, at least at the moment, the algorithms that serve up content say, okay, this is content, this publisher has content that people like and share. All right, it dipped, but it's back up again. And because of the 3-day life cycle, overall, you're doing well. Now, this is also something that is not new. If you think about linear TV, when you have a new show and you're launching it, you talk about the lead-in program. You build the audience ahead of time. And that's sort of what is going on here. Also, why do people use influencers? People use influencers because they've got all these posts that people enjoy, and then they'll have some brand thing nobody cares about. But you'll watch it because you like all the other posts that the people enjoy. And now I want to talk a little bit about, if we've been talking about user experience is what's driving the user's behavior. But to publishers, it's all about user behavior, user biology. And that doesn't really change that quickly. This is how people read on a screen. Top left, very strong. Lower right, less strong, but still pretty good. Not so great here, very weak over there. In television, linear television, we tend to bug down here, lower right. That's all fine. And we see that a lot happening on social, when they put stuff on social. The only thing is that Facebook is so social is mostly Facebook. Facebook is 92.5% mobile. Now, the population at large is 70 to 90% right-handed, okay? So if you're holding your phone like this, where is the thumb and the ball of your thumb covering in your scroll? It's covering this area. So maybe what was fine in a TV set is less fine in mobile. Maybe you really should be putting your brand logo up in that prime area. And that's just thinking about biology, how people are interacting with the technology, and taking advantage of it. So it really is, if content is king, user experience is God. It's what's driving everything. And you can't unring the bell. It's happened. So no matter what the executives are saying, they got to really deal with the realities of what's happening. So any questions? Anyone? Yes?
You see situations where, like when you're testing, you might actually make changes too rapidly and move
All right, so the question is, when doing testing, can you test too rapidly, and do you make an adjustment for that? We have not been doing the A/B testing. We have been watching other people's A/B testing, okay? So I can't speak to absolutely that. What I shared with regard to Netflix's A/B testing was very simplified. They have a very robust cycle of who gets what, how, when, and where, and it doesn't seem to fatigue the user. Any other questions? Yes?
In the TNT example that you gave where you got a call by the full disclosure where it's
Okay.
TNT, yes. But I'm curious of your opinion on the value of the show page versus the brand handle for the network.
I think that they both have value, but I think they've got to work in concert together a lot harder. The show page is important and people are fans of the show, but I think what we should have on the show page is far more branding. What I see on the show page, TNT especially, is I don't see a lot of TNT logos, so the building of awareness that this is a TNT property isn't necessarily as strong. And then I also think you should have some cross-promotion happening, so more of the show material is showing up on the brands page. And also a brand is larger than just original programming. So you're going to have some reruns, some sports, some other things on that brand page that wouldn't show up on a show page. I do think they both have value. I just think that we need to build greater recognition. I mean, if you think, for instance, like HBO, they have that mnemonic in front of every single show, so you know that that's what it is. I think those things help. All of it helps. Any other questions? Yes?
With some of the UX stuff that you talked about being really effective, or some of like thumbnail construction or having like a baby title or things, do you think that there might be like exhaustion with the viewer for some of that?
That is actually really interesting you should say that. And the question was, do people get exhausted with some of the, if everybody's showing emotional faces, does it cease to be effective? Well, I was actually at Netflix yesterday and talking to one of their product guys and talking about their A/B testing and what they were finding. And there are a couple of things. One is that everything I talked about was US, okay? So there are cultural variations. But also they had just had an email blast go around that the best thumbnail for a show was a coffee cup. Okay, that flies in the face of everything I've just told you. What I would say then is, again, it's almost like that BuzzFeed cadence issue is what's the environment? What else is going on? Another thing that they found was very successful in Bloodline. I don't know if you're familiar with that show of theirs, but they found that the burning boat was more effective than the actor's face. Now, it could be that that actor has kind of a flat effect, and also burning boat is kind of, if you think about people and danger, that might be appealing. So yeah, I think that that's another reason why you can never assume that you always know. Things are shifting. If you don't have a team of data scientists, though, I think Netflix does an amazing job with their product. I would look at how things are shaping up there. What do you see there? And you can kind of reverse engineer what they've already spent a lot of money figuring out. Any other questions? Yes?
To really do this well, how much do you recommend, or do you see people running a few tests and learning from those, or just testing everything constantly forever?
Well, I think it goes to budget. I mean, you do what you can do. I think that you can learn, all of the information you get back is old in a way, right? It's already happened. But it can inform you, like, oh, I seem to notice the types of titles that seem to be performing, ask questions, or I seem to notice that the types of titles that are performing are the ones where we actually use the show name in the title rather than something else. And then you implement it. And if you seem to see things are going up, I would go with that. It really is, ideally, you should always be having multiple titles, multiple thumbnails. You should always surface what's the best and do that. That's just not possible for everybody, though. Yes?
Have any results been tabulated for length of video in short-form videos?
Any results tabulated for length of video? No, I have not found anything around length of video. There may be. A lot of the stuff I search and I'm like, ooh, what are they telling people? I'm gonna learn from that. I've not seen anything. I will say that, attention span, everybody talks notoriously short, but then you see kids spending all day binging on something. So again, it really depends, I think, on what it is. Any other questions? No? You all know everything. Well, thank you so much for, yes, a question.
I was actually on your Twitter, kind of looking more at your weekly social measure.
Oh.
Do you do additional correlation then to how much either linear or app activation may occur from the more successful? I'm looking, I work for Disney frequently.
Oh, you guys are blowing doors off every week.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you also did additional correlation periodically to see how much activation was coming from successful social penetration.
Some of that we would actually need to be partnering with. We do this all on our own. So if Disney would like to engage us, we'd be happy to study it more closely. But it really, I have to say kudos to the team at Disney because they really understand their audience. They really understand the platform. And when I was talking to the gentleman from TNT, I actually used Disney as an example of understanding Instagram especially and how to highlight their programming for their brand. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share. I really appreciate it.